Mr. Jack Dearlove. Give it up for Jack. Thank you.
Ready to go, yes. Hello, my name's Jack, and I'm going to talk to you about the retirement of the space shuttle. More importantly, actually, even though I'm a massive, massive space geek, I'm really happy to see it go, because it means that NASA is going to go further, go cheaper, and more importantly, go safer. To give a bit of context, for the past 6 months, I've been back to Florida a couple of times as part of something that's called #NASATweetup. It's where NASA invites 150 of its Twitter followers to Kennedy Space Center, to the press site, to watch a launch from 3 miles away from the launch pad. It was an amazing experience. I got to see the Space Shuttle Atlantis, the final shuttle, take off. And the noise, you just won't believe the amount of noise it makes when it takes off. That's the picture I took. But that's also the reason I'm quite happy to see it go, because I never want to watch a shuttle launch ever again where I have to cross my fingers that the thing doesn't explode. The design of the space shuttle was fairly flawed from the start. It meant it was held back by the fact that NASA had to make a lot of compromises. They didn't have the money to make it on their own, so they had to get into bed with the Air Force. And it meant the orbiter, the main shuttle bit, was actually a lot bigger than they would have hoped for. That meant they had to have more fuel to get it off the ground, and it meant they had to attach it to 2 solid rocket boosters, which are cheaper than liquid rockets, but unfortunately more dangerous. They're like a firework. Once you light it, it kind of goes and you can't stop it. Nevertheless, 1977, Space Shuttle Enterprise started testing the gliding things, and in 1981 we got the first launch of the first space shuttle with 2 astronauts on board. But unfortunately it was also the first launch NASA had ever done without actually testing the kit with a robot before. It's a dangerous setup from the start, and it was a compromise, and it wasn't what NASA needed. And unfortunately, we got 25 missions in, and then that happened. One of those solid rocket boosters, one of the ones that's really dangerous that NASA doesn't want to put humans attached to, failed, and unfortunately it exploded. It was a massive disaster, and unfortunately, NASA didn't learn. That was the problem. It was too cold on the day, and the space shuttle was meant to make space kind of travel routine, and NASA got a bit cocky, and hopefully with the end of the space shuttle, space travel won't be treated as routine anymore. There's been several other instances with the shuttle that has failed. That is the Space Shuttle Atlantis 7 years after. It only didn't blow up 7 years after the first disaster because that bit of aluminium is a tiny bit thicker than the stuff that's on the rest of the shuttle. And it's the same disaster, it's the same problem that caused Columbia to explode in 2003, ultimately dooming the shuttle. Like I said earlier, it was a awkward setup, and I'm quite glad it's gone. That's the main point of it. If we never have to see this again, and with the new kind of rockets and the new designs we'll bring on some sort of new era, that's positively a good thing. The other reason I'm quite glad it's not happening anymore is because it's finished, in my opinion. It's done its job. If you haven't seen that picture before, that's the International Space Station. It's as big as a football pitch. It travels at 17,500 miles an hour. It's about 200 miles above our heads, and if you time it right, you could actually see it go over. The space shuttle took it from those 2 modules to something as big as a football pitch in about 10 years, and I think that's a pretty good job. Tick that off, it's done its job. You wouldn't run a car that was 30 years old. Why run your space rocket? It means we also don't need the space shuttle to service this thing anymore. We don't need it to bring crew up, we don't need it to bring cargo up. And NASA can't go beyond what's called low Earth orbit with the shuttle. It just can't go to the moon, it can't go to Mars. We need to design something like that. That's the Russian Soyuz capsule. The Russians built it in the 60s, and it's still running now to a certain extent on similar designs because it was simple and it was cheap, and it's what the astronauts use to get to the space station at the moment. We design that, or we design this. This is a SpaceX capsule. It's built by the guy who used to own PayPal. Any of your eBay transactions 5 years ago pretty much paid for this thing. It's going to the space station at the end of the year, and hopefully they want to take it on after that. And this is NASA's next thing, the Orion capsule. This will be the thing that takes us to Mars and takes us to the moon, not the shuttle. I want to leave you with a picture. It's called the Pale Blue Dot. It was taken by the Voyager spacecraft in 1990, 6 billion miles from the Earth. You might be able to spot it. It's the tiny little dot right up in the corner. The reason that I'm so glad the space shuttle is gone is because the space shuttle can't take that picture. We need something that can.
Jack Dearlove, thanks very much. The stuff we're learning this evening, it's incredible.